How did the war change life for women? Our objective today is to be able to explain the main changes in the lives of women during World War I. So what do you think would change for women during World War I? First of all, why do you think life would change for women during wartime? And secondly, what do you think the major changes would be? I'd like to pause the video and consider both questions. So how did life for women change? So many have argued that World War I was key for women's rights because of the changes that happened both during and just after the war. They took on many new roles, and in 1918 were given the vote for the first time. However, others have argued that we should not over-exaggerate the gains for women at this time. They still had less rights than men, and in fact it was only women over 30 who could vote after World War I, and it wasn't until 1928 that women over 21 were allowed to vote. Before the war, 5 million women worked, and by the end it was only actually 6 million, an increase of 1 million, which some argue was not that significant. The government thought the women's main role was in supporting the men. So initially, women were not thought to have any new role in the war. The government propaganda did try to persuade women to encourage men to sign up, but it was more about their role in supporting their menfolk to do the right thing. However, women were expected to help out in family businesses where men had gone to fight, but this was nothing new. However, by the summer of 1915, it was clear that there were major shortages in certain industries, and so women would have to take more of a role. So how easy was it to employ women? Now, the 1915 munitions crisis made it clear that industry was desperately short of workers, and the Ministry of Munitions was keen to get every person possible focusing on the war effort. However, trade unionists had been reluctant to employ unskilled men or women in the factories. They were worried that an unskilled worker would get paid less than the skilled workers, and that this would drive down wages for all, and that their members who were away fighting would come back and find their jobs had gone. So the trade unions resisted employing women at first, but eventually the government persuaded them and came to agreements that the wages would be protected for the men and women working in the factories at pre-war levels, and also that any returning men could have their jobs back, effectively that women were only doing them temporarily, and so they were able to start employing women in the factory. So women were recruited initially the same as men. In August 1915, all men and women between the age of 16 to 65 were required to sign up so they could be assigned work. Now, as the shortages began, the government soon began to actively encourage women to work in different industries. Now, this was interesting because many industries were still very resistant. So actually what the government did is in their new munitions factories, which they controlled, they went to the stage of employing only women in the majority of roles to try and change the perception that women couldn't work. Initially, a lot of the women worked in the munitions factory or in organisations like the Women's Land Army, which was out to help with the harvest. But soon, women began filling many different roles, often roles that were considered traditional men's roles, like mechanics or engineers, were being filled by women. And ultimately, it came down to anywhere there's a vacancy, women were now able to apply. In itself, a major change. At the same time, the women's campaigns continued, but with a different focus. So the suffragists carried on campaigning and supported the war effort, but it was the suffragettes who really took the mantle in trying to push the government's agenda. And in fact, they were given £2,000 by the Ministry of Munitions to arrange a rally called the Women's Right to Serve, where both Lloyd George and Winston Churchill spoke at to try and encourage women to support the war effort. The Order of the White Feather very famously sought to shame young men into joining up by giving them a white feather if they were not in uniform. And the Mothers' Union produced posters to persuade young men to fight by encouraging their mothers to tell them they should do the right thing. The war also had a large impact on home lives. Beyond the fact that the men weren't there to work, there were food shortages and price increases, which led to cheap restaurants being set up as people couldn't afford to buy their own foodstuffs, and the government funded national kitchens where women could go and collect meals to take home for their families. One of the effects of all the extra women workers was that landlords in the cities put the rents up, causing women to not be able to pay their rent. So what happened was there were rent strikes took place over rent increases in the cities, until the point that the government had to pass a Rent Restrictions Act, limiting rents to 1913 levels. Women were also paid separation allowances if your husband was off fighting, which became a pension if they were killed. So there was some support from the government. And there was also a newfound focus on motherhood, with Mother's Day and National Baby Week being introduced during the war. The war also had an impact on women's social freedoms. Fundamentally, they were more financially independent, either because they now had their own income, or because their husbands were away and so they were in complete control of the family accounts. So they started to go into restaurants and pubs on their own. Some shortened their skirts and some began to smoke in public, which was unheard of before the war. Many people did not like this, and there was examples of many protests, including pubs in Hartlepool refusing to serve women. And the government started to become worried about the spread of STDs, with many of their servicemen becoming infected due to sleeping around. So the government issued a regulation that said if a woman infected a serviceman, she would be put in prison. And interestingly, there was no corresponding punishment for a serviceman who infected a woman. So in summary, the general perception is that the war improved rights for women, though that can be challenged. Initially, all that happened was women were asked to encourage men to fight and to help out, but shortages led to women taking on more of men's roles. However, this hit resistance from the trade unions, who did not want women driving down the wages of their members. Women were recruited for many different roles, and this expanded as the war went on and shortages spread to many different areas. At the same time, there were various women's groups who continued to campaign for the war effort in different ways. And home life for women became harder as there were shortages all round. However, there were new social freedoms, and the lives of women changed because of these, though this did cause a reaction from some people. So lastly, I'd like you to consider the statement, life changed completely for women during World War I. First of all, how did life actually change for women? What were the main ways in which their lives would have changed? And secondly, how permanent do you think these changes would be? This has been a Flip Your History video. More information and more videos are available on TES if you search Flip Your History, or for more information about Flip Learning and my Flip Learning journey, go to Twitter at Flip Your History or my blog flipyourhistory.wordpress.com. Thank you for listening.